Hello, welcome to Highfinity. In this quite lengthy video, we are going to recreate a complete website from start to finish. We will create the layout, styling, some functionality for the navigation, and then we'll publish the final site to a custom domain. I'm Abdul, and I'm joined by Gerard. Some of you may be familiar with the both of us, and hopefully you'll find this video useful. Our WebMaker technology uses a low-code approach to help you build enterprise-scale web applications. The resulting applications are flexible, and you can customize them to suit your exact requirements. In this video, we will be reproducing the website from our friends at Dark Studios. It's quite a cool and contemporary site, focused on electronic music production. The WebMaker Lite edition is free, and you can access it online. We will be focusing on the front-end features to enable you to create and deploy a complete custom website using just the Lite edition today. In a follow-up video, we will take you through another step-by-step guide where we will show you how to build complete enterprise application functionality, including the use of REST services and database servers. Enjoy the video, and with that, I'll hand you over to Gerard.
Thank you, Abdul. So hello everyone. As Abdul just said there, we're going to look today at page design, creating hopefully a nice looking website, and looking at more layout, styling, theming, and dealing particularly with static content rather than transactional, more complex applications. So one thing about that is everything we're going to talk about today is something you can do with the free Lite edition of WebMaker that we offer. So if you're interested in what we're showing, then do check it out. So to get started, we're gonna open up the studio. Okay, so as usual with WebMaker, we start with the new project option on the project menu here, and we get our choice of templates to use to the initial base for our project. So in this case, because we're building a website, we're going to start off with the infinite template on the right hand side here, and this gives us an example of a static page, sections of content, and you can scroll up and down between them. Now for this video, we're going to try and replicate a website, create a website for Dark Studios. So here's an example of the site and the sort of look and feel that we're after. And we can come back and we'll look at this page more as we go through the video and we start building up our site. Okay, so if you're new to WebMaker, this screen that we see here when we open our project, this is what we call page design. The important sections in the middle here, we have a WYSIWYG view of what our page is looking like. We have a palette on the left for adding to and manipulating the content of our page, and on the right hand side is where we configure all the properties of individual elements, buttons, text, images, etc. So in this video, we're just looking at pages and layout. We're not looking at full transactional application, so we're not worrying about server-side logic or any of those sort of features. Now we can see here that because we picked this base template, we've got some content and some structure here straight away for us. We can use our preview option straight away. Shows us our page, and we can interact with here. We can see we've got some animations and some nice effects on the text there, and the menus. So this is a good example of a page that you may want to use. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this template, this example that we've got for free, and we're going to go about changing it, changing the look, changing the content, changing some layout information, and until we get the page we want, which in this video we're looking at this Dark Studios page. And then once we're happy with it, we're going to do a quick bit about how we'd export those pages, get that information out of WebMaker, and how we host it on our server. So if I just switch back to this website with an example of what we're trying to copy and replicate, we can see there's some similar stuff. There's menus, as you'd expect, headings, text, images, and we've got different sections and different bits of information that we can use and put onto our page within WebMaker. So we can we can start working through, work at the top of the page, work down. We're going to create all our sections, put our content in. So the first thing I've noticed here is, well, in this example page, our menu's on the left-hand side, on the output that we want to get. We want to move the menu over to the right-hand side. We want to add some text over here rather than just a logo in our top strip. So we can go through and start putting all of this information in. Now, initially, I'm just going to worry about content rather than styling and look and feel too much. We will then, at some point, we'll look at the theme editor. We'll bring in different colors, different fonts, images for the backgrounds, etc., to really bring alive our final design. So if we're looking at the middle of our page here, we've got our WYSIWYG view here, which we can interact with, and we've also got what we call the outline view, which is a more tree representation of the same information, of the controls and the content that you have on your page. And we can see if I select something in either view, it's keeping in sync. So we can easily see what I'm dealing with. And you can see as I click on something here, in this case the menu, I'm getting a set of properties on the right-hand side that I can use to interact with it. So on this example, there's a search option in the heading here in my toolbar. Now I don't want that, so I'm just going to get rid of it from this page. But what I do want to do is I want to move my menu so it appears over on the right-hand side. So the easiest way to do that is to introduce a layout group. Just drag that from my palette and then move my menu into that layout group. And now what I can do is I can select the group. We can see with my highlight that it's giving me in the middle here that this group is stretching all the way across, and I can zoom out so I can see my full width of my page. And what I can look is in my responsive options on here, we've got a nice grid of alignment options and layout options for my group. So in this case, I want to align that content over to the right, and we can see that happening straight away. So the other thing I said about, when we look back here, is this text at the top, in this case, so the company name. We can add text controls very easily. We just drag them onto our page. So maybe I'll want a page heading up here. Now, potentially that text looks a bit too big to me, so I'll switch it probably to one of these other headings we've got. Now we can easily add different headings. Just drag and drop and say, oh, there's a whole set of different sizes, and we can pick which one we like. The other option that we do have is the concept of merging controls. So we know I've got a page heading. I don't want to change it because, say, I've gone in and I've put my text in, and I don't want to have to recreate all of that. So I can pick a heading and just merge that with my control and keep the text in the settings. So you can do that merging for any of these controls, whether it be text or text boxes, all the form type controls if you're building form applications. And you can either use the option here to toggle that on, or very quickly hold the shift key down as you're dragging information and controls to activate that mode. So this is looking better. Maybe I want to align that text to the left rather than in the middle as it is there. The same way as we did with our groups, under our responsive options, we have our alignment options for our text controls. And we can also adjust the width. Okay, so we probably want to put a different logo up there. Now the logo in this example is an image control. And we can see on our properties when we select that image control that we can pick a different file, or we can use sort of dynamic information if we were building a more complex application. In this case, we can just select the file and choose which image we want to use. So at the moment, it's a new project. I don't have the images that I want here, but I can easily upload the files. Okay, so I've uploaded a logo image, so I can then just select that file. You can see straight away it changes on my view in the middle of the screen there. Now, if I wanted to adjust the sizing of that logo, I can use the options on the right, and I can also drag in the middle there as needed. If we continue looking at the options on our nav bar at the top of the page, we've got a menu control here, and in this case I want to change which options are available on the menu. So if we have a look at on this site again, I'll switch back. So products, pricing, about, contact. Maybe we won't bother with the form for now. So I can use the options control here, the table here, to add and remove and reorder those options on the menu control. So really the only one that was missing out of these is pricing. And we can use the arrows to reorder those options. Now we'll come back to how we set the target of where we're going to go when we select menu options a bit later on. But we've got the right options, we're getting the data in place. Okay, so then we move on to the main content of our page. Now, one thing that WebMaker has when we're designing pages is the concept of a skin and then the page itself. And you can have multiple pages that reuse the same skin. Now, this blue line that we can see here, or this surround, indicates the divide between the information that's on our page and the information that's on our skin. And we can see that same blue divide is shown on our outline view here. Now, so far, everything we've been looking at has been in terms of the content of our menu bar, our top strip as such, which is information that's on the skin. So if we added multiple pages to our project, we can do that down the bottom here, and we will come to that later on. Each of those pages will inherit the same skin information, so we don't have to redo our menus and redo our logos, etc. And if you want to, you can hide away the skin information while you're working, so you can concentrate just on the contents of the page. So in terms of the layout of this page, we have a grid we can see here, which is in a sort of one column layout. So we have multiple grid cells for each of the sort of sections of this page. So we can stick with that same overall layout, and we can just adjust the information that's shown in each section to give us the display that we're after. So we can go through and we can start changing some of this text very easily. I can just double click on the text on the WYSIWYG view here to change it, or if I just single click, we've got the options, full options on the right hand side if that's easier. You can see whether if I change it in the middle or on the right hand side, it does the same thing. Now in this case, this section of information here is using the rich text control, and that gives us more control over the layout of the information, which is why when we select that control, we get a different rendering on the right hand side for us to configure the information. Okay, so again we can pick some different images for the logos. We can give some sizing so we can start to see something. So the exact layout of this logo and the text we will come back to and fine tune as we go through. So we actually want to add a big image into this section as well. So we'll use the controls, and we can see we have an image control. So just like the text controls we dealt with earlier, we can easily drag the image in and then adjust it. So in this case, we don't want to have the label next to our image control. So you may want that if you were using this, say, for a status on a list of projects or something, whatever. But in our case, we just want the image itself. And again, we don't want that logo. So as we've done, see the preview there. We can select that file. Right. So one thing you can see here is we've got scroll bars up here because that image is actually bigger than the space available for it. So what we want to do actually is we want to get that image to nicely resize to fill its space, fill its container. So if we look at the options for that image, as we saw earlier, we have alignment and sizing options under here. And what we can choose is we can choose the fill available space option. Now what that does is say I want the width of my image to be sized accordingly to fit into the gap. So if it needs to get bigger, then it will get bigger. If it needs to get smaller, it will get smaller. Okay, so you can see we've lost that horizontal scroll bar, but we still have a vertical scroll bar here, which doesn't look great. So if we look at that, and you can see that the section that's scrolling is actually our grid cell here. Now the reason for that, we can click on our grid as a whole, and we have a whole load of options for laying out and controlling our grid. But if we look at the row heights for each of our cells, we can see that this first row, has a specific height. So in this case, we don't want that, and we can just say, make it as big as the content that it contains. So now that cell, which in this case is the first row of our grid, can get bigger to fit the extra content that we've put in it. Okay, so we're starting to see that we're getting the right information in that section. We've got the right idea of 2 buttons. Maybe we want to change the text for these a little bit. And one thing we can see here is our 2 buttons are using the same style, where actually we want one of them to be the secondary action that you want people. So most people, we want to come in and say, hey, sign up for the free one. But if there's more info, a button there, but we don't want that to dominate. So within WebMaker, we have the concept of a secondary button style in all of our default themes. So I can easily pick that, and you can see that the secondary style has been applied now to that button. Now, at some point, we will go through and we'll change these colors. We'll change the style of these buttons to look more like what we want as our final look. But for now, we're just getting the content and the structure in. Okay, so I think we've got enough stuff here for our initial homepage, and now we can move on to the other sections. If I bring my skin information back in, you can see we've got products, pricing, contacts, and maybe we'll use the about section to show how we can use a totally separate page rather than just a section on this page. Okay, so if we were to look at products now, idea of the sort of page we want, and it's the same sort of structure that we have here, just different images without the icons. So we're just tweaking it and adding some more content. So for now, this section here, I will just remove because we haven't really got an equivalent. So we can easily just remove whole sections, and we'll leave an empty cell there for now. But we can, once we're happy, we can either tidy that up and move it, or adjust it as we need. The thing I should say is when you're designing, it's useful to hit the save option. That will allow us to then switch to our preview and to see how our changes are looking. So I can switch back now, and you can see how it's picked up those changes to the menu and to that front section. and one that also gives us is a save point if we ever want to revert back to previous point in our work. By using that save option, we can do that easily through the save history here. So if we move on and start looking at this product section, and we compare to this site that we're trying to replicate. So there's a video embed here that for now we'll ignore that and come back to that later. But you can see we've got some text at the top, maybe a logo, and then we've got these sections of images and text. So this section that I'm dealing with at the moment, we can see we've got an overall group with a grid within it. So we can add text controls. And then we may want to add some spacing. So one easy way is to just drag on a spacer control, and then we can easily resize that to give some padding. When I preview my pages and use the running pages, you won't see that spacer mark, but you'll see the space that it creates. Okay, so in terms of each of these sections, it's a similar idea that we're trying to get here. We've not got the little icons, and we've got some headings that stand out a bit more than we have here. So I'm just going to get rid of those icons very easily. And then I'm going to make these controls subheadings. And as I said before, the easy way to do that, we can merge them on. Hold down your Shift key. Or the other option, I said you could turn that on all the time. Okay, so now I want to go through and just quickly change some of the text. Okay, so then text is got the content in I want. I now want to change these images, and like we've done it before, I'm just going to upload them all. Right, so I've got my images over there uploaded now, so I can pick these and very quickly go through and get this looking right. So again, here we're cutting off the edge because the image is too wide. So in this case, I can adjust the styling and use the same option as before to say fill the space. And in this case, it's shrinking my image. Let's just do the same. Okay, so that looks good. I've got 3 sections there, but if we note on this website, there's actually a few more sections that I want to add. So I need to start thinking about adding some more rows. Now, as I said earlier, we can look at the structure of this section, and we can see that we have a grid here. And we can also see that we have different layout here for different breakpoints. So what I'm designing with at the moment is for a standard desktop type display. We can see I've got that selected here. But I could also look at some kind of phone display, and we can see that we've got a single column layout there rather than the 2 columns that we've been looking at so far. So it's easy to design your pages and your layouts using one type of device, one breakpoint size, and then add overrides or adjustments for the others as you need. So in terms of adjusting my grid and adding rows and columns, there's a whole number of ways of doing it. I could edit my size information on the right here. I can use the right-click options on my cells to say insert rows. See that here. And then the other option is I can turn on our grid overlay mode here, which gives us a very clear view of where my grid cells are and the overall grid structure. And I can use the plus buttons that I've got on the edges of each grid here. So as I said, we will add 3 rows to the grid for the extra information that I want to add. So then in terms of the content of each cell, these ones we can see we've just got an image in them. Sometimes we can see the nested structure easier on our outline view here. Whereas these other cells, we've got a nested group of controls. So the lowest levels, we've got some headings and our content. We've got some filtering and we've got some animated effects. I think we saw in the preview that the text slides in from the left or the right accordingly. So for these new entries that I want to create, I could create all this structure manually. All of these controls are on my palette. So for example, we've got these animated group controls and we've got info panel controls. And I could build those up by dragging those on and recreating my structures. But in this case, as I want it to end up looking like or the same as the ones I've already got, I can just copy the information I've already got, these structures, and reuse them. Now we can easily copy our controls using right-click options as you'd expect. But sometimes I find it easier to just drag the information we want. So say I want a copy of this group, I can drag it where I want to. If I use the control key as I'm dragging, then I get a copy rather than a move operation being performed. So that's a very quick way of adding copies of information on your page. So we can go and we can do the same thing into the remaining cells. And I'll just copy some images as well. Okay, so I've got the right number of entries, and I'm just going to go through now and manually type in the text as before. Okay, and then finally, let's just pick the images. Okay, so that's looking good. And the final thing we had at the bottom here, a bit of text and another button. Before single line text, so we can use that body text control. Drag that into the bottom. We can find the button controls on our palette if we want to. Okay, and let's just add another space in there. Okay, so again, let's have a look how our preview is looking. You can see all of that information all looking good. Okay, so we've added these extra cells to our grid, it all looking all right on our preview, the desktop. We can just do a quick check to say, what's our phone layout looking like? Just make sure that everything is in the right order and the right sequence. So for example, here we've got text and the the information after each image. And we can see here that actually I'm looking through and I've only seen my 3 sections. I'm not yet seeing the extra information that I added. So I can look at my grid and see, okay, why is that? And you can see we've got this highlighting over here to indicate that you may need to look at these settings. So because I had multiple breakpoint configurations already for this grid layout, when I've been adding rows into my larger size screen devices, you may not necessarily want all that information to be shown on the smaller devices, because it might be this is just extra information that you're showing if you've got the screen space for it. Now, in this case, we want to show it all. We just want it in this single column view. So I can edit the size of my grid on my small devices and say, actually, I want all of those cells to be visible. I do that, you can see my warning's gone away. And I can flick through and I can see all my information's there. Let me just zoom in a bit so I can see it clearer. But one thing you do notice is maybe the ordering isn't quite right, because here I've got my text before my image, whereas I actually want them the other way around consistently. So I can switch back into my grid mode, and I can just simply drag and drop the cells there to reorder them. So now my image is before my text. And likewise, let's put the image before the text. And come back out of the grid mode. So we've got image, text, all the way through. So I think we can move on, and we'll look at the next section. Remember, on our heading, products. Okay, so now we're looking at pricing. So let's see what that had. And here we've got a relatively simple layout. We have two columns with some text within them. So the next section I've got in my example in this page was actually some kind of about information. Now, what we're going to do for this example is we're going to move all of that and put it on a separate page at a later point. So for now, I'm just going to delete all that information, and we'll create what we want to show instead. So as I said, this is going to be pricing information. So let's add a group into here, and we'll call it pricing. To get the sort of 2 columns that we want, there's a number of ways we can do it. Possibly the easiest option is to use a nested grid within here, and to make sure we only have the 2 cells. So we can just remove that second row. Okay. So one other thing we want to do with this new section that we're working on is we want to keep the consistency with the colored backgrounds that you can see on these other sections. So we can apply the color filter to this new group we've created to make sure we keep that. And you can see that having an effect. And now we can add in the content into these new cells. So in this case, the Dapple Dark Studios offer 2 versions of the product, a light version and a pro version. And we can see various features that we want to highlight. Now in this case, I'm just going to use a number of body text controls. To output these. Alternatively, you could have looked at using a rich text and used the options on the right hand side to put it all in one control. Just depends on exactly the approach you want to take. Those. We probably want to center some of the content, so we can easily adjust that, and we'll do the same for the second cell. Final thing in there is we'll have some button to say, hey, I want it. So and we'll do the same for the Pro Edition side. So one thing we also have is this info text at the top. Okay, so one thing we may want to do is look at the sizing of some of this text. We want this bit to be smaller, want that price to stand out. So we can do this with our themes and our CSS files or SASS files, which we'll come on to later. But for one-off styling options, we have the settings on the properties on the right-hand side here. Or we can look at font size, and I can see what it's inheriting from my theme. And so actually, I just want this one to be slightly smaller. And we still want that centered. As an example. And then we can click on our text and say same thing. Let's make this quite a bit bigger. Like that. So one thing we see, well, we might want a bit of space before our buttons. So in the same way as we did before, we can add a spacer. And in terms of our right hand side here, we want to push this button down to the bottom of the container. So similar to we did with our menu right at the start of the video, when we were moving that over to the right hand side, we'll add in a layout group, put the button inside that group. There we go. And then we look at our settings for the group. We want stuff still to be centered. And in terms of this height of the group, we want to fill the space available. And actually, we want the button and the content to be down the bottom. There we go. But actually, I want a bit of a gap at the top here to allow for this information. So I'm going to add a spacer up there as well. And you can see automatically then the size of that group just gets a bit smaller, and our button still stays at the bottom where we want it to be. Okay, so if we just come back to our thought about multiple breakpoints and how our information is going to look on smaller devices. For the moment, we've configured this as a 2-column, which is fine for our desktops and tablet devices. On our phones, we probably don't want it to be like that, and we want our second column, the Lockdown Pro box, to wrap down underneath. So if we select the grid and look at the layout information we've got here, we only have one set of details at the moment, which it tells us is going to apply. This is our defaults. It's going to apply to any device that's 0 pixels or bigger in this case. So whatever device, you're going to try and get this 2-column layout, which isn't exactly what we want. So we can add what we call a breakpoint override using this plus button at the bottom here. We're saying, well, we actually want this 2-column layout to be from our medium-sized devices. So this is our tablets and larger, or potentially some very big landscape phones, maybe. Okay, and you can now see that we've got 2 sets of information here. And the highlighting, see this lighter white background here, has switched to this medium breakpoint that we just added, and that tells us which styles are currently being applied to give us the WYSIWYG view in the middle here. And we can confirm that, but if I switch to a smaller phone, you can see that the highlighting is now switched to this first section and showing us that is the information that's being rendered. As we're saying, we don't actually want it to be 2 columns in this case, so we can edit the settings here and say, actually, we want 1 column, but we want all the information, so we'll give it 2 rows. And straight away there, we can see how that's giving us the look that we're after. Okay. So if we go back to our sections here, the final one we want to include on this page is the contact information. Now, in this case, as I said, we're not dealing with transactional forms. We're more static information. So we're going to simplify this contact page and just remove some of this form type information. So I will keep the heading and maybe some of this text. And maybe we'll keep the email button as well. So I thought I'd move that text out. There we go. And then I'm just going to get rid of the rest of that in this case. Some text in there. Now, one thing we can see with our link here, that is an email link, we've got an icon here. Now we call that the placeholder icon. So the envelope probably makes the most sense, but if I wanted to have a slightly different one, maybe I'll have the open envelope. We can easily change what those icons are. In terms of what happens when the user clicks that link, we want it to open their mail client so they can send us a message. We can look at events and we can see we've got a mail to URL that we're using, which will trigger it to open an email. And what we can also do is get it to pre-populate a subject if we want to for their email. What we'll find if we look at the preview, so we can see it's opened up our email client and that subject's coming through for them to easily send us a message. Okay, so we can see that our menu is nicely hanging together there and taking us to our relevant sections. So the way that is working is to do with the names that we've given to our sections, such as pricing or contact or products. If we look at our menu control and the events, and we're just saying if something exists on our page with the value of the menu item they've selected, that's what that's saying, then we just scroll to it. And if you look at the values of these items that they've selected, they match the names we've given to these sections on our page. So as a result, as we click on our options on our menu, we're just scrolling down to see those sections. Okay, so the only thing really left on our menu that we were going to look at implementing was an about section here. And what we're going to do is we're going to treat that as a totally separate page, just to show different ways that you may want to construct your websites. So what that does mean is that this cell here, we're not using it. So we can easily just remove that row to tidy up. Okay, so in terms of content on the page, what we've got here for our main page is looking quite good. So we're going to create a second page that will do for our about information. So we can see down the bottom here what we have our thumbnail strip of all the pages that are in our project. At the moment, we've only got the one that we've been looking at, and we can see anytime we can get a nice view of what that page looks like. So there's the plus button here. We can just click that easily to create our second page. And as we can see at the moment, this is kind of an empty page, but coming back to what I said a little bit ago about the skin that the page uses, we already have our menus and our footer, just the single item there on our new page. So it's not totally blank because we're inheriting that skin information. So we can just double click here to open up a page design tab for this page. So you can see we've got our main form, everything we've been working on so far, and we've got our about us as well. So we can easily see which one we're working on. You see the highlights different, it shows it in a larger image. Now, if you find that this thumbnail strip is taking up too much of your screen, you can always collapse it down so you've got more space to work with in the middle. And it's still very clear as to which page we're currently looking at. If we have a look at this about page here, we've got some headings, text, another image, and some more text to play around with. And we also have an icon in the background here. So maybe we'll see, can we try and replicate some of that styling. So as we have done for the other page, we'll start dragging on controls. So it's often useful to have a container for the content that you're going to add, so we can manipulate it and adjust it all in one go. So for now, I will just add a layout group onto this one. I think overall the structure of this is going to be simpler than our other page, so we may not need that grid approach. But we can always change it and adjust it later if we feel we need to. So as I said, we had a heading. We probably got a tagline on there. And then we've got some text. Just mapping here. So we've got heading, tagline, text, subheading, or text with some image, and then a whole paragraph of text at the end. So I'm just going to replicate that with some controls. In the middle there. And we also had that logo at the start as well, so we can add an image for that one. So at the moment, it's not looking much like what we want, but as we go through and we start putting in our text and adjusting the content, we should see it start to take shape. Again, we've got to scroll by here because that image is actually a big. Okay. So we can preview that and getting there. But one thing we've got nicely on our main page is we're not filling the screen. So we've got a bit of space on these larger devices, at least to make it easier to read. And we think, well, maybe we want to keep the consistency with this page. So what we can do is we can actually add another container. So if we start nesting these groups, and then on our second group, we can set, rather than saying fill the space, so we can give it a specific width. So say we want 80%. And we use the nested groups to say on the container one, we want to centralize it. And what we can do as well with that 80% there is we can say, actually, that's only for our larger devices. Medium devices, do we want that 80% width? And for the smaller devices, we'll just stick it to being sized by the content. So we can see we don't have the space on our smaller devices. But on our tablets or our desktops, we do get that spacing. Okay, so one thing we want to do, we've got this paragraph of text here. There's some information at the bottom here. And one of the things is say, please get in touch. And what we'd like that to do is we want to make that a link to our contact section of the page that we were just designing. So when we export our pages, when we're dealing with just static content and static websites like we are today, we will end up with a file with a collection of resources, and each page that we're creating here will be one file in there, and then we'll have CSS and whatever files as well. And we'll see that a bit later. So what that means, though, is that if we want to link between the pages, we can just use our page name here and use that as the file name that we're going to link to. So in this case, we can select that text here, make it a link, and the link URL will be main form with the HTML ending. Now also what we want to do is go to a specific part on that page, and in the same way as we had our menu control is looking for the names of those groups, we can do that with our link here and add the hash sign and then the section. And we see we've got a link there now in our text. And we can always switch back to our other pages and check the names of those groups and adjust them if we need to. So one thing, if we're looking at this about page, is the styling at the top here doesn't really look how we want it to be. we look here, we want to fade the icon into the background, maybe move some of this text over to the right, etc. So we could do that by using the overrides as we showed earlier. We can click through here, we can type in whichever CSS fragments we need. But often when you're doing styling work like this, it's easier and maybe more maintainable to use external files to put that content in it and that styling. Now within WebMaker, we have a files tab on the left-hand side here that shows all of the CSS and script files that our pages are using. Now every page makes use of a theme file, and we'll come on to that shortly. But we can add our own additional ones for any overrides that we may want to use. So in this case, we can say include a file, and we're going to create a new one for this project. Now, WebMaker has built-in support for SASS, which makes editing your CSS a lot easier. So we'll create it with the SCSS extension. Once we create a file, we can click that edit button there to get a new window ready to type in our content. We're adding this file application-wide, so it lets us add customizations for all of our pages in just the one file. So the changes that we're about to do, we will restrict those to apply to just the About Us page initially. WebMaker will make sure that on every page that you're using, that page name will be an ID at the top of the page, so we can easily identify and target our styling. So what we want to do there, if we just select our file, so have we got it there? Yep, sorry, there we go. Pixel in here. So first of all, we want to change the styling on this image. Now, at the moment, as we be going along, we've not been doing much with naming our controls. We've been generally leaving them with the defaults here. But if we're trying to identify and target a specific control, it can be helpful to give it a better name to let us do that. So we can easily double click or right click rename, whatever. So in this case, let's say this is our About Us page logo. If we switch back to our CSS, we can then use that name in our CSS rules to identify it. And in this case, what we want to do is we want to take this whole control, the whole About Us logo control, and move it out of the normal rendering and push it to the back of the page. So all of the individual controls in WebMaker will be given we call a wrapper element around it, which allows us to pick up the control and everything around it rather than just the image itself. And we can use some simple CSS positioning. Just put some initial sizes and we'll see what this gives us. And we maybe want to blur it into the background. On there. Now we can see as soon as we save our changes here, the WYSIWYG view in the middle is picking that up and showing us the effects. And likewise on our actual preview, we can see what is happening. Okay, so to help us with doing some of this styling work, it can be useful to see the HTML structure that is being created. Now you'll notice on the the preview tabs, we have a link up here to move it out to a separate tab. That just takes away the WebMaker wrappers and makes it much easier to then inspect the page using the standard browser developer tools. So I can open those up and we can have a look. For example, that image we talked about, and we can see here is that About Us logo wrapper element that I mentioned that we're applying our styling to. And what you'll find is you may need to do this and to look at the HTML when you're doing some more maybe advanced styling or adjustments to your pages. The other thing that can be useful with the developer tools is most of the browsers nowadays have a sort of responsive mode that lets you see different devices and how the pages are going to look and react. So obviously within our studio, when we're designing, we have our drop down here, and we've been using that quite a bit already today. But you can use the browser tools as well to interact with the final pages and still see how they react and how they change based on sizing. So one thing you can see, remember that spacing we put at the edges, we're not taking up the space on the smaller devices, which is what we wanted to happen. Okay, so if we come back to our styling here of this logo, we now need to push everything down and move this text over to the right a bit and generally add a bit more space to this page. So what we can do is we can pick up on our section headings and our tagline controls. Okay, so maybe we might want these to be centered on our page to move them over. Yeah, okay. Maybe something like that. And maybe we'll make the image a bit bigger. So we can easily pick up our image within our overall wrapper for our About Us logo. And I don't know, let's just try it. Nice. Yeah, I think straight away we're getting along the right ideas of the look we're going for there. We can refresh this preview. Let's see, we're getting there, something that looks quite good. Okay, so we've done a little bit of work there of doing individual styling changes and how we can isolate very specific controls and adjust them using our CSS files. And we've looked at how we can use the inline properties against all our controls within the studio as well. So another area that you will often be looking at is making changes across your whole project. So for example, this theme has got a blue as the sort of highlight color that goes to all our buttons and our headings and whatever. Now, for this app, we don't want that. And also we don't want this image in the background that we've got of the sort of clouds or whatever, because that doesn't fit with the look that we're going for. So to make changes like this to your overall project, we can use the theme designer that comes with WebMaker that gives us a lot of control over that. So at any point we can open this up using the paintbrush icon at the top here. So within the theme designer, we have a view in the middle of roughly what this theme looks like. So this is just gives us example content, headings, controls, panels, tables, etc. A lot of the common types of things that you're going to use on your pages. On the right-hand side, we can see we have a set of default themes that come with WebMaker, and we also have a placeholder for any themes that you create. So as you're using WebMaker, changing styles and whatever, you can save your themes and then use them across other projects that you may create in the future. And then on the left-hand side, we have all our options for overriding various different colors and fonts and other properties for our theme. So now we can very easily make changes and see the effect it has. If you wanted, for example, to switch to a light theme, this is obviously a very dark theme, you may want to start with one of the other themes on here. So we can have a look. Maybe we take this one here. And very quickly we can see an idea of what that theme's going to look like. Is that the one I want? Yes, okay, then I can click this, make it current, let me start editing it and use this as my base. Oh, I'm not sure about that one. Let me have a look at a different one. Look around, see which I like, think, no, actually, I'm going to stick with what I had already, which is my current theme, and I'm going to use that as my base and start making changes. So if we come over to the left-hand side, the first section we see is what we call our primary inspiration colors. So these are the two main colors that then filter down into all of the different elements of our theme. And as we go down, it gets split up into our override colors. And in the bottom level of the tree as such is all of the individual elements that make up our theme. So what we can see is if I start at the top and say I didn't want blue, I want this to be, I don't know, a much darker green color. We can see as I'm making changes, I can see it straight away in the middle of my screen here. But you can also see how that filters down into all the individual colors. It's all the ones that were blues and now picking up that green color. So what this lets me do is very quickly, using just these two initial inspiration colors, get a close idea of what my theme's going to be, and then I can go and fine tune each of the elements and the lower levels if I need to. So if we go back and look at this example of this Dapple Dark site, there isn't really much color in the text at all, and then there's just the blue colors coming up in some of the links. If we go back to where we had some of the buttons as well, there's a bit of a blue highlight there. So if we were to try and bring that information into our theme, so actually what we're saying is our text color needs to be a lot lighter here rather than the green, because there's not much color in our highlights. And then we can go through and we could override it for our buttons and our hyperlinks. So again, it's more the button text color, and we want that to actually be a brighter blue color. Okay, so as well as dealing with colors, if we look at some of the other sections on our theme designer, we have a section on images and filters, which is quite useful for setting these background images. As we said earlier, this isn't the background image that we want for this, so we're going to change it. So the background image here, I can just hit change image, and I can. But here we have a different set of images because we're dealing with the theme itself. So while I could pick an image from outside my theme, so where I've been looking before, and pick the image, ideally you want to keep all the images for your theme within the theme folder, so that if I then save this theme and use it in a completely separate project that will have a whole different set of images for the project itself, my theme will still work because it's all self-contained. So that's why we have the two image directories, and when I'm editing my theme, I should be dealing with images within the theme itself. Okay, so straight away, got that new image now, and I'm getting a very different look to my page. So some of the other options in this section, I may want to have different background images for my info panels, and I may want to adjust the transparency and the color of the sort of filters around my different blocks. So you can see it's not that clear now with the darker image, but there is a transparent background on this section here, and I could adjust that here if I wanted to. But I don't want to, so I'm just going to undo my changes in this case. So another area that really makes a difference in terms of the look of your themes is the fonts that are being used. Now we can see the fonts that are being applied by default here, and we can then change that to add in the fonts that we want for our theme. Now in this case, for this page, it's using some different fonts from Google Fonts, so we will pull those in and use them in our theme. So in this page, we can always inspect a page, see what fonts it's using. In this case, it's two fonts from the Google Fonts library that I've got selected here. So the easiest way to import those into a theme, select this import option, and then we can just copy the line of text that it gives us. And if we go into this edit link here to edit our underlying file, we've got some imports, and we can add in the import of the fonts that we need. And now we can go into our font selection text box and set the font we want to use. And this is the one that we want to use for most of our text. That one, the secondary font, is giving us our logo text here, which we will come back to shortly. And you can see the change applying to the text in the middle there. So one other thing we can do is we can find the exact colors in use, etc., using the browser tools if we want to get an exact match rather than playing around with the sliders and the color selectors. So we can see our value there. If we wanted to change our selected color. Okay. So then if we were looking at buttons and seeing if we could get the same style, again, we can look at the background colors, get the numbers there, and apply those. So our button background color. And border color in this case, we want to be the same. And now we need to get the text color looking right. and we're getting our buttons to start looking much closer to how we want them to. One thing we can see there is that hover effect is obviously now not looking right. So we can see in this example there isn't really a hover effect being applied. So we can just set our hover color here to be the same as our normal background color. Okay, and we can go through and adjust all of these individual colors if we need to make sure we're getting the right styling. So one other thing you'll notice is the edges of these buttons are a lot rounder. So we can have a look at our border radius and we can just increase that. Okay, so we can save that, and we've made a good start on getting our theme looking closer to how we want to. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you can save themes for use in other projects at a later point by using the clone option against any particular theme. In this case, we want to clone a copy of our current one. So we can give it a name, and you see we've got a copy of it in here to use at a later point. And as we were doing with the system themes, where we can preview them and see roughly what they look like, we can always preview our custom themes in exactly the same way. Okay, so we've done some work on our themes. We can always close out of here, and you can see our studio here picking up the changes, and likewise our previews also taking into effect that new theme. Okay, so one final layout change we may want to look at is this main logo on the home page. Because if we click back on here, you can see the alignment's different. The logo's the left, text, and also we've got our custom font that we want to apply as well. So if we switch back to our main form and we go back to our page design, for this we can have a look. We've got a logo and we've got a heading control here. Now, in reality, on this app, we want to break this heading up onto 2 lines, and we want to move it to the right of the logo. So there's various ways we could look at laying this out. One option that comes to my mind is maybe let's use a grid initially. So let's do that and see how we get on. So I'm going to drag the grid on there, and by default, each of the grids that we create is a 2x2 in size. Now, in this case, we only want one thing on the left, so I can merge these 2 cells together. And that's where my image is going to go. Now, in terms of the text, we're going to split that up into 2 different heading fields. If we just adjust the case to match what we're trying to achieve. Okay, so we're getting closer with our layout. Now we need to look at sizing. We don't want this to fill the space, so we can see where we had fill the space. We actually want to say fit the content. And this one we want to centralize that. And there we're starting to get closer. So in terms of fonts changes, we've seen with the theme editor how we can change it for our overall project. We can change it for individual controls very easily using the font selection option here. You can see how that's being applied. Obviously, I could have made these changes in the styling, the custom styles file that we looked at earlier. Would have been an alternative way of doing it rather than applying it directly here. Okay, so we've been adding lots of sort of overrides inline styles down here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to now take those and put them into the CSS file that we've been working with, just so it's easier to maintain these settings, etc., going forward. So the first thing I'm going to do is rename this grid here, so I've got a marker that I can hook onto. So so as we go back to this file we've been looking at, I can put in a section for that. And you can see we have a main heading. Take all of those information. You can see we've still got the same effect with the styles. So slight quirk here where I'm getting some scroll bars that we probably wouldn't want to be seeing. So I'm not sure if that's a browser specific issue, but I'm just going to make sure we hide those because they don't look. Okay. So the final area really of the layout and styling we're going to look at is just to adjust this logo at the top on our nav bar. We have a look, they've got something a bit more in the background, a bit like we did earlier with the about page. Refresh that so it's similar style to we did here with the about page earlier. So again, easiest to use our styles file, and we can pick up on so in a similar way to we did for the logo on the about page earlier. Gonna pick up the wrapper element around this and position it so that it moves out of the normal flow. And we're gonna grey it out so it's not quite so strong. The thing I'm going to do here is give a size to the image. Okay, see that's getting close to what we want to achieve. So I think maybe we might want to move this text over, give it a bit of space at the left. So we could do that the same way, we're picking up with the names, but one other option that's worth talking about is using class names instead of IDs for the styling. Often if you want to make changes or apply styles to more than one component, multiple controls or whatever, it's much easier to give the same class name to multiple things than you can style them all in one go. Within Within WebMaker, we can easily add classes using the properties on the right-hand side. And also, if, as an example, I added a new class definition into my file. So I've got my class that I want to now use. If I select my control, and you can see as I start typing in here, it's picking that up for me, and I can easily just select it, and we can see that a little bit of spacing has come through. So generally, if you're ever doing any styling that you think might be used in more than one place, using class names becomes a much better option because it's much easier to reuse. Okay, so if I were to just save my changes now, I'm at a point where I'm happy with the look and feel of this. The final functional part that I want to fill in is update my menu so that the about option that we haven't dealt with yet is going to link in to the about page that we've already created. Okay, so when we talked about the menu earlier and we looked at the events, and we saw how we've got functionality to say if it can find an element on the page that matches the ID of what you've clicked on, then scroll down to it and show that information. What we want to handle now for this about case is to say, well, if it's not on this page, how do I do it? What do I handle? So we could go through here and do a whole series of conditions to say if the value is products, then do this. If the value is pricing, then do this. If the value is contact. But what we'll try and do is keep the generic functionality for most of them, and then just have specific cases for the exceptions where we want to do something different. So we'll get rid of this option here because we don't want to show a message. That's just an example. And we want to add another actually. So if I've been able to scroll to something, then we don't want to do anything further. So we can just stop at that point. Now we're going to add a condition, and we can use the value check here to say if my menu field equals about. So if I've selected the about value, because we're doing all of this processing here on change of our menu selection. And what we want to do in this case is if they've clicked on the about one, then we just want to go to the about page. So we can do that just by changing the URL of our page. So we don't need to worry about any complex submission or anything. We can just single line just say switch us to the about us page. Remember, as we talked about earlier, the pages will become HTML files. If we keep them all in the same directory, then those links will work okay. And the final thing we're going to handle here is I've not found something to scroll to because I was on the About Us page. I've not clicked on About, but I need to now go back to the main page. So I'm just going to have a final alternative option and do something similar. Rather than About Us, we know that page is called Main Form. And just to complete that and give us slightly better behavior, we can say if I'm going to the main form, I might be going to products, pricing, or I might be going to contact or whatever. So let's add the indicator to say which part of this form to go to because we've got multiple sections on it. So exactly how we did when we did that link from the contact us text from the about page, we put the hash, and then we put in the value of our menu. Now, this get field value is one of the generic functions that are available in all the WebMaker apps. that you're creating, and there's information in the documentation about those if you need more detail. But basically it's just saying get me the value of the menu, what they've just clicked on, which would be products or pricing or whatever, and go to that section on the main form page. So hopefully if we put those events in, we've completed the link between our menu options regardless of which page we are on. So I think we're happy at a point we can now get this information, I get these pages out, and I want to put them onto my server. So to get the information out, it's very easy. We just use our publication menu, and we want to use the export pages option. So I think I said right at the start that everything we've done today would be something you could do with the Lite edition. So you will see if you are using a WebMaker Studio Lite license, then the only option you'll have on this menu will be the export pages. And get a pop-up with some information here, and we can click our download. And when you click that download, it will give you a zip file of the all the information you need for your pages. You can see we've got our 2 pages here. We've got our theme information and our CSS information and images, etc. So given that, we can take these files and we can put them onto any server or environment that we'd like. As an example, we'll just go through how you would add it to a DigitalOcean droplet using the WebMaker server that we have available. Now, we've done a lot more info on how you go about using this WebMaker server droplet in other videos. But the main point here for this information is you would need to use some kind of FTP client, get it over onto the server, and make it available. Okay, so we do have a DigitalOcean droplet running at demo. And one thing we can see here is it tells us the location of our web apps and the content that's being rendered. So because we're not doing a full application publish from the studio, because we're just talking about static pages using the WebMaker Lite edition functionality, so we have to do a few more steps to get that information up there. It's not going to happen automatically for us. But what we can do is we can use an FTP client. So here I am using FileZilla. The actual client doesn't really matter. And we can browse to that location. Yeah, so if we find the root folder, we can see this is the index page that's currently giving us this helper information, as it tells us there. So we can create a folder under here. And then we can just upload all the content that was in that zip. Now, if we look at Dapple Dark, the page is called main form, and we can see that we've got our page that we've just been working on and designing. It's all nicely rendered on here. And the about, taking us to the about page. We can link back. So that's all up and live, and anyone would be able to now access this information and see. So relatively straightforward. We've got our information and our page content live and up for all to see.
Wow, that was a deep dive. Thanks again, Gerard. That was awesome. Well, we hope you enjoyed the video, and hopefully you'll give WebMaker a try. As I mentioned at the beginning, we will be releasing a follow-up video where we will take you through a step-by-step guide showing you how to build complete enterprise application functionality, including the use of REST services and database servers using a low-code approach. If you want to discuss anything, please engage with us. you can connect with us via the usual social channels. You can also email us at support@highfinity.com or engage with us on our forum. Thank you for watching, and until the next time, take care.